Helps me get ready. Hey everybody, welcome back to Art by Galen. I'm Galen Eilenfeld, and today we're going to be covering 2-point perspective. Last week we did 1-point perspective. We covered drawing shapes, as well as drawing accurately reducing shapes in perspective. Today we're going to cover all of that in 2-point, as well as using multiple sets of vanishing points. So hop over here with me again and we'll get started. You may notice I put my sweater on since before the intro, and that's because I am freezing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start off is just doing some basic shapes in 2-point perspective. So we're going to start off by giving ourselves a horizon line, or maybe. Okay. And we will give ourselves two, I'll do these in red so we can see them a little easier, vanishing points on that horizon line. Now the simplest shape would be drawing a cube. So we'll keep our sketch lines in red and we'll do our actual drawing lines in blue. So the first thing we want to do is find one of the sides of our cube by dragging a line from the vanishing point and just pulling it out, and say about like so. And we'll pull another from here and we'll cross that line. And so we already know one corner. From where these two lines intersect, that's going to be one corner of our cube. I'm going to stop it right about here because I want to show some of the top plane of the cube. So the way we figure out the rest of it is we take another line from this left vanishing point to the top of the cube, and then one from the right to the top of the cube. Now the way we decide how far back it goes, we can do with one line, and that will give us all the information to make the rest of it. So if we decide we want to put this right about here, that'll give us this edge, which will also give us the top plane for that side if we draw a line from here to the left vanishing point. And if we want to cut it right in the center, which just for this video we'll do that. I mean, you don't have to do that. But if you were looking at a cube straight on the edge, that's how it would be. But I mean, if it were rectangular, it wouldn't matter if you wanted to do it a little further back. And then wherever those lines intersect, both here and here, that would give you your corners for the back side. And then you could use this vanishing point to the farthest side, and that would give you that other edge. And so just real quickly, I'll kind of scribble this in so you can see the actual shape that we made. Of course, my hand drawing isn't as perfect as the line tool, but it gives you an idea of what we've done here. Okay, and so that's a cube, pretty simple. So we'll start a new layer. And this time we'll do a pyramid and a cone. Same thing. We'll do horizon line. Give ourselves two vanishing points, and then from here we will do a square bottom. And I'm just giving myself these lines about like so. I want to make it relatively square looking. And so now we have this outline, right in this area. So that gives us the edges of our pyramid. So let's see. If we draw lines from opposite corners inside the square, that will give us the center of that square. And from the center, we can draw a vertical line and create the height of our pyramid from there. And then from there, same thing as with 1-point perspective, you draw lines from the top point to all 4 of your corners, or all visible corners, and there you've got your pyramid. You can use the same method that we used in 1-point perspective to create a circle inside the square. And just real quickly, we can do that again. We cut across the center of the square all the way through, cut across the center of the square all the way through, and then these 4 outside squares that it's given us, we're going to cut those in half as well by going corner to corner. And you can actually further divide these by going through the center points. And this is just for accuracy's sake. Now I'm just really quickly skimming over this. If you want to see it a little bit slower and a little bit more in depth, you watch the 1-point perspective tutorial video. But from here, what I actually would do is these outer corners, these outer squares, I would divide those one more time, honestly, just for accuracy. And so now we know that I'm going to go to a new layer. So if we've got a circle inside this square, and the center is in the center where the square is, we know it's going to touch the edges. Let me zoom in a little bit. I know it's kind of hard to see. Okay, so that ought to be a little easier. So we know it's going to touch these edges for sure. We know it's going to intersect these points, and this is the center of those outer squares. And so that gives us kind of an accurate way to sketch in our circles by creating curves in between those points. And I know this isn't exactly perfect, but I mean, it's pretty darn close. You can make it closer to perfect by further bisecting the grid. But I mean, this is pretty darn close. Okay, so if we turn down the red a little bit, you can see that. Like that gives us an accurate, circle inside that. And same thing as the pyramid, vertical line, and then from there, we can create the cone. Something that's a little bit more difficult, but if you want to create a sphere in 3D space, let's turn this down, but we'll use that same square. I mean, ultimately it's just going to end up being a circle, but like let's say you're drawing out a landscape or some sort of scene, and there is a specific spot where a sphere happens to be sitting, and you want to be able to draw it accurately in that spot. So we will give ourselves this square one more time. Okay, and then we need to decide about how high is it going to be. We want to make it relatively square looking, so about like so. And the same method we used to build our cube earlier. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to cut our cube in half both directions, horizontally and vertically. We can do that pretty easily by drawing a line. Try to get this as big as I can where I can still see my points. Okay, there we go. Drawing a line through the center, and we already know roughly where that center is. And if you didn't have it, you just draw lines from corners to corner, and then where it intersects, that's your center line. So from there, we've got it cut in half one direction. So we'll bring these lines in here. Let me do this in a different color. So from here, going from that bottom line that we just drew, if we draw vertical lines up to the top plane and then draw another one across, and the same for this one, just so you can see, that cuts it in half in this direction, and then we do the same thing the other way to cut it in half again. So draw that line down through the center where it cuts through the outside plane. That gives us a center line on those sides, and then from where this one touches the top, we can draw back to that vanishing point, and it cuts it in half and gives us a vertical line that should go down to the center on the bottom. Yep. Okay, so we've cut it in half both ways. Okay, so now we've got it cut in half, on the vertical axis. So we need to do it one more time on the horizontal. And I'll switch to a blue color. And let's see. And the way we would do that, same thing, just drawing connecting corners to find the center, and then vanishing point through that center, and that gives us the middle line there, and then we can connect from where it hits this corner to the other vanishing point, and that'll evenly divide the other side. Same thing to the other edges. I know it gets kind of confusing, there's a lot of lines in here. Okay, so the blue line cuts it in half from top to bottom, and the green lines cut it in half both ways, side to side. Okay, and we need to do the same thing over on this side. Find the center, and we'll give ourselves another line from the vanishing point to that center, and then from this center to this vanishing point. And what that does, the center of these two, and we'll switch over to another color, I suppose, and I'll use a brush. You can see these points. Here and here, having a line, coming to that from each vanishing point, like so, gives us the heart of the cube. And that means right here is the absolute center of it in 3 dimensions. And so from there, that's also going to be the center of your sphere. And where it touches these outside points, from the center to that outside point, that's also going to be the radius of that sphere. And so you can actually just get a circle using your circle tool for this, and we'll create one real quick. And I may have to resize it, and I'm going to put it on to multiply, that way we can see through it. And we will move it. Let me put it on free transform, that way I can put the center right on that, and I can shrink it down if I need to. Okay, and so that's essentially how you would figure out, where a sphere would sit within a square area in 3-dimensional space. I realize it's a little bit off center, and I figured out that that's because when we drew our guidelines, it didn't exactly line up with the dead center right here. But that is the method you would use to create a sphere in 3D space. Yes, it is just a circle. I'm pretty sure you could eyeball it pretty easily, but if you wanted to, let's say if you're doing a globe or something like that, like if you're like a classroom, if they've got a 3-dimensional globe sitting on a desk, this is how you would draw and calculate exactly where it would be. A little complicated, but it's good to know how to do this stuff. Anyhow. Okay, so now we've done the sphere, we've done the cone, the pyramid, and the cube. So now we're going to talk about doing reducing patterns, and that's like the last time we did a chessboard, and we'll do the same thing again this time. All right, so for the chessboard, what we're going to do is start off just by giving ourselves the bottom edges of the board. And I'm going to pull these lines down pretty far. There's a reason, and I will show you exactly why momentarily. Okay, so what we've done here is these, from this will be the bottom corner of the board, and somewhere along these two lines will be the other corners. But what we need to do first is decide, okay, where is the first row going to be? So if we do it like so, and say, all right, that's our first row. From here, it's different than how you do it with 1 point perspective. With 1 point, you would find the center and then draw, the way we did in that other video. But from here on this bottom corner, we're going to give ourselves a perfectly horizontal line, or parallel with the vanishing, parallel with the horizon line rather. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to make myself a mark from center of this point to where it intersects right here. And let me get a little darker color, that way you guys can see it a little better. So from here to here, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of that layer, that way I can space these out perfectly. And I'm just going to overlay that mark. So essentially what we're doing is we're giving ourselves even measurements on this horizontal line. So right now I've got a grid. I might not even be able to get all 8 sections on this line, but you'll get the idea of what we're doing. Maybe for simplicity's sake, we'll do a 4x4 grid, because there's really no need for us to do 8 if we don't have to. Okay, so we've got this, and we've got these evenly spaced lines on the horizontal line. And so now I'm going to group those together. Okay. Go back to my line layer, go back to red. Okay, and then from there, we'll go from the vanishing point to those points on that line. And that will evenly reduce the row sizes for us. And then we would do the same thing on the other side. And I'll switch to like a light blue color so we can do that and differentiate. So from here, we'll create the first row. We'll pull that line all the way through, like so. And then I'll do purple for this one. Horizontal line. So from here to center. Okay, and that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Back here, go back to our blue, and then from vanishing point to those points, it will accurately reduce those rows as well. And so that's how you would do that. I do want to point out that you can also do this by starting with the full size and then subdividing it into equal sections like we did earlier. Which would be good, like if you're drawing a building that, like you're doing a diner that has a checkered floor, or anything that you need some sort of unit of measurement for that 3D object. This is a great way to do it. The other thing that I want to go over a little bit is using multiple sets of vanishing points. And you're like, you might be thinking, all right, this is already kind of confusing. Why do I want to throw in more stuff to make this even more confusing? And I'll give you just a brief example. Let's say, all right, we've got one scene, and maybe you're drawing a picture of a guy packing a couple of boxes. All right, so we'll go to a dark blue, and we'll give ourselves 2 dark blue vanishing points. Okay. And say, all right, there's a box over here. And that's like so. And planes, just that same method that we used earlier. We wouldn't really see those back corners. You might see this one if the box is open from the top, but if you needed any of those lines, you can draw them in using your vanishing points, and then you'd have your vertical from here. And that's great if that's all you need, if you need just the one box. But let's say, okay, well, he's got 2 or 3 boxes, and I want to do those at a different angle than these. If you try to draw those boxes from these same sets of vanishing points, they're all going to be aligned parallel, to this one, or perpendicular, depending on how it is. Like if I drew another one like right here and still using these points, it's still going to line up with it. You see what I'm saying? It'd be like they were perfectly arranged for whatever reason. And I mean, they may be, but that's not what I'm showing you. Okay, so we will dim this down a little, create a new layer, and this time we'll use green, and we'll create 2 more sets of vanishing points, but on the same horizon line. That's the important part. They have to be on the same horizon line. So like this time, maybe instead of being off the edge, have it here, and then have this one relatively close. And then, so from there, you do the same kind of method. And that'll give us an accurate way to draw another box, but it's at a slightly different angle. It's not running parallel to this one. And what I mean is, like, if you look at the edge of our blue box right here, and then the edge that's closest to that on the green box, they are not running parallel. They will eventually intersect, but they're sitting on the same plane, because we're using the same vanishing point, or the same horizon line, just different sets of vanishing points. That's a pretty practical use doing boxes. Another thing you may use multiple sets of vanishing points for is, for example, like if you were drawing a supermarket, like a store, the building itself would use 1 set of vanishing points. The parking lot, like the dividing grid for the parking spaces, would probably use another, unless they were perfectly, perpendicular or parallel to the store. And then the cars parked in the lot, they may not be perfectly parked. If they're off, then you're going to need a separate set for those as well. And the thing is just trying to figure out exactly, what sets you need. So it's fun to experiment with, because you can really come up with some neat things. But the key to it is they always need to use the same horizon line. The only time that they wouldn't use the same horizon line is if you're in an area that has lots of plains, like if lots of hills and things that are on different levels and different angles and slopes. But that's a bit more complicated. We will cover that in a future video. But I do hope that this was informative, and I know these are long. I know these are probably kind of boring if you're not into it. But I said it at the beginning of the first video, and I'm going to keep repeating it. I think that perspective is honestly one of the biggest things that artists neglect. No amount of any other fundamental will help you if you have broken perspective in your artwork. And I've done it a million times in my past, and it's one of the things that I've really fought to try to correct in my work, and it's something I do still struggle with from time to time. But that's part of why I'm doing this. This is my journey with you guys, and I do appreciate you sticking around for it. Next week I'm going to do something a little bit different, and then the week after we'll jump back onto the perspective stuff. But until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and take care.